Welcome back, everyone, to the Disaster Tough podcast, where we share insights into the big plays and right calls of leadership. We dive deep into the stories, lessons learned, and ideas that will help you in the field. Let's go. Welcome back to the Disaster Tough podcast. I'm your host, John Scardena. I am so excited for this episode. This year, I've had an amazing opportunity to learn from different perspectives of people outside of traditional EM roles, really trying to expand both my understanding, your understanding as the guest, of just trying to find cool jobs, cool people who have done it right. I met with Sweta in North Carolina just pretty recently, actually, and we were going to talk about Lowe's and her job and what she does. And I was just hyper curious about how she addresses supply chain and risk and a bunch of other things, business continuity. And then I got to hear her personal story. So I'm going to really put her on the spot because she's going to have to do it again on the show. But I was just blown away. Talk about somebody who's been incredibly driven, has had opportunities that has kind of come out of nowhere, it seems, but not out of nowhere because she's put in all the work and all the effort. And really what she has done in essentially, I think, like basically 10 years is just taking things by storm. And her mind is just so incredible. And so with that, I want you to think about the effort she's had to put into her jobs as she's moved forward in this last 10 years and what she's been able to accomplish within that. And then think about some of your processes and walk through that. The entire time I talked to her, I kept on hearing like that fun chant from a movie that said "One of us, one of us, one of us." Like seriously, like she is off the charts, and I am very honored to have her on here to be able to talk to her and learn from her. But I really hope you get something out of it as well. So with that, Sweta Patel, thank you for coming onto our show.
I am happy to be here, glad to be here, and glad to share the story that you said, which I laughed about for sure.
Well, you joked with Denny and I about writing a book, and I'm not kidding. If you wrote that book, I would read it. Two, I would hype it up. Three, we'd get you tons of sales because, like, honestly, like, I just think your story really is special. I also think the way that your mind works within risk is incredibly important, and how to overcome. I wouldn't say overcome, but how to get people to collaborate with you. Very important things that you were calling out in North Carolina. So it's going to be kind of some of the same stuff there. But because I've talked about, the story here real fast, can you walk through how you got to where you are now, just for our listeners' sake?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, how, John, you mentioned that we had a chat, and I joked about it because whenever I talk to my husband about that one day I should write a book, and we both actually laugh.
Yeah, I think you should actually. I'd be all in for it, to be honest. So,
So, well, just the journey started back in India, where I grew up, born and brought up in state of Gujarat, India. And as I mentioned before, but for the audience here, I never went outside of my state of Gujarat, except for going to Mumbai to get a visa to come to USA. So the way it worked for me, never thought that I was gonna first of all come to USA. I got married to my husband, arranged marriage, and that kind of destiny brought me here. So I was doing my bachelor's in accounting finance, and then I was also doing a CPA equivalent there, chartered accountant. So and then I started doing my master's in business administration. So I left the master's and the chartered accountancy in the middle, moved over to USA, and in a hope that I'm going to start a perfect career, a perfect career in the accounting and the finance world. So I mean, guess and figure right where I am today. So that's where the story starts.
mm, well,
um, of course, when you come to a new country, one thing happens that nobody realizes, that of course the culture shock. For me, language. I did my college in English, but as you know, that in India, even if you do your college in English, read and write, but I don't think you get a plenty of opportunity to speak in English. So for me, it was like getting a control over the language was the very first battle or hurdle, if you want to say. So when I came, everything was different. New country, new family, actually arranged marriage. So, you know,
Everything's new. Literally every.
everything's new, trying to know everybody, trying to learn the culture. Definitely took a little bit of chance study for sure, but of course a lot of new things were coming at you, so I couldn't really focus too much on that. And then of course, a year into it, and my husband recently started his career too, so we were both babies when we started. We got married, and then we started our careers. So there was a need definitely to kind of, join the workforce. Now, having no control over the language, what I started doing is I started working at a hotel as a guest service specialist. And again, this is like in first time it happens that, okay, you know what? I don't need no pay. You just let me come there. I'm just gonna speak with your customers and try and learn English.
The L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio solves problems and is specifically designed for emergency services. How do we know? We field tested it with medical, urban search and rescue, and collapse and confined structures. This radio is amazingly tough. Check out the L3 Harris Extreme 400p radio at l3harris.com right now. How do you spell Doberman Emergency Management? EOP, OEP, HVA, HMP, Thyra, TTX, Drone, PDA. Whenever you need an expert, Doberman Emergency Management field experts are there for support. Contact an expert at DobermanEMG.com today.
CBRNE Convergence, the world's largest conference for the non-conventional threat, is heading back to Orlando between October 28th and 30th, 2024, with 3 days of workshops, lectures, and interactive sessions delivered by speakers from around the world on the latest issues and approaches to CBRNE and hazmat. Make sure to claim your early bird discount by registering now at cbrneworld.com/event/Orlando.
I mean, you're so kind for that, to be honest, because you just wanted the opportunity, right? And that's pretty humble, seriously.
Well, there was hunger than being humble.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
There was hunger to learn, and there was hunger to kind of get in the speed of things and get back in the rhythm of things that I left off when I was in India. So definitely that hunger was there, and all of us laugh about it right now. But at that time, that minimum wage, right, $7.25. That one day I will learn it, and then once I will get fully hired, I'm gonna get paid that.
Oh my gosh. Like the aspiration for minimum wage, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So once I was there, also on the side, what I started doing is I started applying for a bunch of jobs, about like 30 to 50 applications in a week, and calling agencies on a weekly basis and say, hey, do you have something coming up? And to everybody's surprise, I was going full force, accounting, finance, audit, right?
Right.
And then one day, I got a call from an agency, and this was somebody, an amazing woman. It was her last day of work there, and last hour of work, and she called me and she goes, hey, I have a job for you. And I got excited. I was like, okay, it's credit analyst job or something in the audit, XYZ. She goes, no, it's completely different, but I think you can do it. And that 1 hour, last hour of her job, the job that I didn't even apply for out of the 50 applications that were going. And then I get a call. I go to this interview. This was my very first kind of corporate official job, going to Bank of America as it's part of the contract. But very first employee coming into the kind of new setup that they started within their SOAC, the Security Operations Center, was researching events. So that's how the first job starts. Again, the first employee going in, and did not realize that became more like a first employee in first or a first set of employees in pretty much all positions that I've been into
Mm.
till
That's,
this date.
it's just wild. What? And I want you to be able to dive into this more in a little bit. But what's amazing to me is that multiple organizations started with you, and I would have thought that those had already those systems for years. So you had to build in something, a new culture into a workforce, even though there was desire there. You basically had to start everything from scratch every single time. Like you were the ultimate start from scratch, do amazing things, even in your own personal life, right? You start from scratch when you got here, and then just hunger. That's a great word
Hung-
for it. Yeah.
Hunger for sure. Now, the one thing that's for sure was interesting, yes, along with the hunger, I've been blessed to have met amazing team members, people, individuals here in the United States. Not only that they were patient with me, but at times a little tolerant with me too. So I think that's the most important thing around this. I know we talk about allyship at all levels, right? I don't think there's any other example but myself. If you want to talk about, how allyship's important, from all angles, whether it's women, men. I've been blessed to have met people and worked with people who I worked with in my entire career because somebody who had no control over language, and I feel like I still don't, still learning, but they were very patient with me as I was going through the process. They let me grow for sure. So I feel like that's one amazing thing that one needs to keep in mind. I keep in mind all the time when I am surrounded by people, by team members, professionals starting their career, to be patient and try and let those wings kind of fly.
How do you balance, because you really could give a master class in this. How do you balance the desire to be hungry? Well, your personal, desire to be hungry, as well as being put in roles where you have to do new things by the fact that you're there. You got hired to do new things with the balance of um, being patient, because what I find is a lot of young professionals, especially young professionals, but it can happen at any time. People who are hungry, people who have a lot of passion, people who see things in a different way that could improve systems. Sometimes they're not very patient in that, and they're not able to sustain that over a long period of time. That either the passion wanes or they repel people. How do you balance those two sides of the spectrum there?
I think for me and not for me, but I feel like in general, ownership helps. So the minute you step into a role, it's a different word. For me, it was a different word, going from finance to audit to doing something that's physical security, intelligence focused, starting my career with Bank of America. Completely different, but ownership is the very first thing I feel like anyone good needs to have. Once you know that I stepped into this role and I own this, and once you know that you're an owner, you're not going to go in losses or you do not want to go
Yes,
in the losses. Um,
absolutely. I agree with sorry, I don't wanna cut you off. I agree with that 100%. One problem I see is I wouldn't say problem, I should phrase it a different way. One challenge I see is that people are sometimes afraid, even with all of that there, they're still afraid to take ownership. The amount of times I've heard people say to me, especially when they work for me, and I've had to really help build their confidence, is don't give it to me when it's 90%. Like, "Oh, I took it to 90%." No, give it to me when you think this thing is 100%. When you think it's flawless, I wanna see, because that allows me to understand if they're there, if there's some gaps and we have to work on those gaps. People are always afraid to take it to that 100% mark, but the more you can take ownership saying, "This is my piece. I don't have to worry about other things. I have to be perfect in this thing." I think those people excel the fastest. I don't know, do you feel the same way or?
I feel the same way, and I would add a context there. So the thing with anything you start new and you're afraid of that ownership, right? So you have to keep in mind, and I know I can see that not all trials. You see those medicine on a shelf, you see those products on a shelf at the store. Not they went through thousands of trials before that one product got selected. So I think as a professional, what we need to keep in mind that our idea, 100% idea, may not get selected, and that's where that passion, reduces the motivation. I think one thing that you keep in mind that these ideas combined with the other ideas could become a future product. So just keep them coming, keep them rolling, and then don't be afraid of denials. Don't hesitate. Definitely gracefully accept them.
Well, if you would like to take over our company and be our new CEO, I will step down. I'll get out of the way for you. But you have such a great way of looking at things, and we're not gonna. I want to get into Lowe's, but just for the sake of the audience perspectives, just because I understand a little bit of the background, and please, sort of correct me if I'm wrong, but in like rapid fire at Bank of America, you started jumping up many rings. And then when you came over to Lowe's, you literally started this new perspective on intelligence and business continuity and business risk. And once again, you're finding yourself in uh now with a little bit of experience, a lot of bit of experience, taking Lowe's into a better, a new direction there. For the sake of context with myself, basically every job I've done, I've had to do the same thing. They just weren't doing things. They had their checkbox, and then I'm like, hey, what about this? And there's some really big wins with that. It's a lot of fun to do that. However, there's some challenges as well. Can you walk through, now that we're like 15 minutes into it, what you actually do at Lowe's? Because you're a senior director, you're doing intelligence and risk. Can you explain to our audience what that really means?
Absolutely. So at Lowe's, when I joined in November 2020, right in the middle of pandemic, and guess what you're doing? You are building a global security operations center from scratch because we're right in the middle of pandemic. We saw what happened. We saw how everything responded. We saw the world, in a different organization and a corporation, the challenges they dealt with the existing structures they had in the past. So we learned from a lot of challenges that others faced, and that we try to incorporate and try to build a model that at least helps the current state and a potential future state. So at Lowe's, when I came in, we started building Global Security Operations Center from scratch. Now, I know that when you say GSOC, the word GSOC, it's many different names, many different structures, the way it's designed. The one that we want to build at Lowe's, it's more like a combination of your internal threats and external threats. So I know a lot of companies, we have different teams monitoring internal incidents, taking calls from their properties, assets, buildings now, and then the external threat monitoring, that entire external threat landscape is like entire different team. I definitely do see there are multiple other companies like us who do two together, and I think that's the way to go, because a lot of things that are external facing in no time could come to you. So
100%.
that combination is required. So that's one thing we did. We also have GSOC intelligence. So the physical security intelligence team is part of the GSOC. So that's another program we started building. And as part of that program, we're building 4 different programs under that: protective intelligence program, physical security intelligence, threat convergence, and a travel security program. Again, the unique one out here is the threat convergence program. So when we say what we learn, right, and we do, a lot of companies and many of us, we do hear the word convergence, and that's most of the time used for cyber and a physical security incident convergence. And then convergence way beyond that. And we saw that. You initially talked about the supply chain risk. At Lowe's, any other retailers, supply chain is a big risk for us.
Sure.
So when you look at the convergence, it's just not that. It's the public relations, it's any legal matters, it is any technology issues, along with the information security issues. So threat convergence is one big outlook, one formal touch that we wanted to give definitely as part of this program, where I said, hey, let's formalize this program. And
Sure.
what we do as part of the formalizing the program, that we try to connect all the line of business, or at least key line of business, the departments I mentioned, the legal, compliance, HR, public relations, cyber. We try to get them to meet every month, and we talk about, hey, what's going on? What are you working on? Let's just try and avoid an event. Let's try and avoid getting into an event if we can. If we cannot, then let's try and be proactive in our response. Let's try and reduce impact if we already have an impact. So that's the entire formal concept that we're so proud to formalize here for sure. The other part of the work that I do at Lowe's is the business continuity program. Our business continuity program is heavily engaged in the business continuity planning for right now. And somehow, I'm not sure if other people can relate to me, like one of us moment or not. But whenever COVID started, a lot of enterprise response functions got diverted to being a COVID task force.
Yes. That's a
I
it's a mistake, right?
Yes. So what happened was that there was a successful COVID task force, but I don't think that transition successfully happened to a normal crisis management, going back to your crisis management program. So that's one thing we definitely have a challenge. And currently we're focusing on introducing, well, relaunching our crisis management, our crisis response program as part of the business continuity. So that's one big lift. That's in kind of nutshell, high level, what my journey has been like at Lowe's. And again, it's amazing. I mean, lot more to do, lot more to change, lot more to influence, and that's what we love.
Well, Lowe's is very lucky to have you. As you're talking through the model of how you're building out that model and bringing in the different sectors within your business, as well as putting the threat landscape all under one house, essentially through intelligence and threat monitoring and everything else that you're calling out there. It's funny, the legacy programs that we've gone to on the Doberman side, whether it's universities or otherwise. If I start calling out the specific places, I don't want to do that, but they separate these things out. And when they do that, you have conflicting interests, competing resources, different missions, silos of information, and the reality is things are interconnected. From a communication standpoint, even from a PR standpoint, if something happens at any organization, that can immediately bleed into the morale and or impacts of the business from external or internal threat. And to separate all these things out, again, for the audience perspective, I really do think it's a mistake. Combining these things together and then constant communications with adjacent sectors of information within an organization, absolutely incredibly important, critically important. And yet legacy programs exist. I hope that they're listening to you right now and saying, okay, like that does make sense. Why are we separating these things out? From the Lowe's perspective, it is truly a global operation, right? You have so many things to look at, multiple continents that you're dealing with, simultaneously, and walking through that. By putting it all under one house, you're essentially able to create a create true data science on how things are walking through their process. For me and my side, we go from NATO to DoD to universities, whatever, and it's amazing how many people forget that if you X happens here, Y happens over here. The ripple effect is real. And it's not just your gut. You have to have really great data to watch those things happen and so that you can mitigate where you can. You said so many things I just want to chew on, including the fact that you're like, hey, if we can prevent something from happening, let's do that now. How do you, within Lowe's, because Murphy's Law is real, things break, things happen. how do you determine the ROI of time, right? You mentioned the team switching over, and I do agree that that's a mistake because if you look like economics, right? You can't just do one for one switch. You have an intelligence and capability loss when you do that, right? So how do you allocate? Hey, this is a critical need. This is maybe not a priority right now. How do you shift through those things?
Absolutely. And if I may, I wanted to provide a little bit of I want to add a context to your statement about two separate kind of X and a Y working, and then having the need to for them to be together. So I just wanted to say one word. It's a marriage. So we don't need to separate them. It's a
Is it an
marriage.
arranged marriage?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, absolutely. We're gonna have to arrange it. But
Yeah, good. Yeah.
so if you think of it that way, these programs, right? You think about intelligence, you think about the operations center, you think about the crisis management. This is all marriage. One thing happens and it has impact, effect, or activation on the other end. Now, how are you utilizing your resources effectively? Because I think you really said it well about having to two different departments. You're talking about a lot of duplicate efforts, a lot of silo reporting, and nobody's spared from it. Because what we do is we do something that is right at the time, then something happens, and then we adapt and adjust and update. So that's one thing I think going into your actual question now is basically how do we kind of try and go towards that, let's have that preventive kind of mindset, and how do we say this is the critical need and then this is not. I feel like what helped the most in my entire journey, and especially the most recent one here, trying to create something from scratch, is understanding that everything happens or everything happened was for valid reasons.
Hmm. No discrediting what happened or how it happened.
No
Yeah.
discrediting, no discrediting, because what I said just a minute back, what we did in the past at the time was the right thing to do. And then we are just upgrading, adjusting for now and a potential future. So I think one thing, if you keep in mind, go ahead.
No, I love that so much. So I'm going to call out my audience a little bit, myself included, because I think I'm guilty of this in the past. Your mindset. This is why this is probably one of the many reasons why I think you're so effective in how you approach things. But because I'm a public speaker, typically after a keynote, we do some kind of Q&A. Like I go all over I was just in the UK, all over the US, and I frequently hear the same things. In my after action report, I told them all the things that they did wrong and they didn't want to they didn't want to change. And it's always so negative, right? They assume, and I believe incorrectly, they assume that the other stakeholders in the room are not thinking prudently, that they're also not intelligent. People are trying to do the best with the information they have. Sometimes, a lot of times, there are gaps. We all have gaps in our capabilities and our understanding. However, people inherently are trying to do the right thing, at least the correct action at the time. It also is okay to say that might have been okay then, but we can also do things better now. It is such more of a positive way to do it. And I'm sure you are very effective of getting people to start saying we instead of I because of your mindset of saying, hey, I recognize that you're also an intelligent person. I needed to call that out there because it's very clever, but I also just think that's probably inherently who you are, right? Do you find yourself naturally getting people to do what you want them to do? Because I feel like you're one of those people.
I cannot say that because I may say that and then I jinx myself, and the next move I want to take.
I'm gonna say it for you because so you don't have to jinx yourself. I love people like that. Like, who don't I'm gonna guess it's effortless for you. Well, I want to say effortless. I'm sure you're very cognitive of what you do and you walk through those steps. It might be conscious. However, I bet it's built into who you are. And I would challenge my audience to listen to some of the things that Sweta is saying right now and say, okay, like, How do I inherently become a person who wants to pull people in, who want to find better solutions? Because again, I'm looking at the time here, and I want to be respectful of your time, and I wish we could talk for like an hour or two. But when you're talking about building new systems, you don't really have a model to fall back on. You can look at other people's lessons learned, sure. But you and I have had kind of the same problem set where what seems common sense to you and I may be very new to somebody else, and you have to win them over. Can you combine? It's kind of a two-part question here as we're kind of this last segment. One, how have you been able to not just fall back onto what's always been done? We're just going to do what's always been done. And have you gotten people onto your side? Because those two things you do very well.
So it's very, I say simple, but it's a very clear thing. Having that kind of positive mindset, first of all, having the positive mindset that you will hear the things like nothing is broken. Why are you trying to fix it? You will hear that over and over and over again. So understand that everybody's coming from a very good place, that everybody has a valid reason to resist the change. I think the first thing that you do is you try and meet your stakeholder at their doorstep. Do not expect that you're gonna meet them in the middle, because right now we are the one who needs to influence this change, influence this process change. Any strategic initiative, change initiative that requires you to meet them at their doorstep, and then understand all the valid reasons why resist change, and go behind that why, and then said, okay, I'm with you. We're not gonna break anything. And then they're a little patient with you too and tolerant, because we know that we can likely break things initially.
But we say we don't. Yeah, that's so true.
But they're so patient now that they're like, okay, because we're starting. And one thing with any change initiatives, phases, right? Never just go all out. Of course, test it, proof of concept, pilot, and then go roll out. Let's try and gather those success stories before you move to the next step, because why would they believe in you if they haven't seen your product yet?
Yeah, you have to put your money where your mouth is, right? You have to back up. And that goes back to the being patient thing. It's okay to not roll out the entire program, even if you think or you have great data to back up that. You have to, the incremental changes, the ability to put puzzle pieces together and to play the chess game versus checkers. I did have somebody one time say to me, because I was looking at another process, I was like, sometimes I feel like we're playing checkers and not chess. And they responded with, "Well, you win a lot more often with checkers." So there is some validity to being simple, but also being patient in that process. I'm trying to say, okay, like how do I get you to win over? One of my favorite things to do, and I don't do it very often, but just as like an analogy that might help people understand what I'm about to talk about, is winning people over by giving them what they want while still doing what I want. And, the easiest thing to do is saying, "Hey, I don't wanna go for a walk." And you're like, "I don't either." And then you just grab their hand and like, "I don't wanna go for a walk." And you just start walking. You're like, "I don't wanna go for a," and then all of a sudden they're a mile down the road and you're like, "Wait, what just happened here?" And it's just like, "Hey, like, we don't have to say we're gonna go for a mile. We're just one step at a time, once," and all of a sudden you're like, "Hey, look how far we've come. Let's just keep going." And I do think that is a much more productive way and validating people in what they need, right? There are valid reasons why they push back. It's not always just a negative like I don't want to change. Sometimes there's a lot of fear in there. Sometimes they have found wins in doing what they want, and changing is it makes them afraid that they won't get those wins anymore. But yeah, I agree with you that I'm not going to break this, but we definitely going to break some things. So yeah.
And you said something where we connect for sure, both of us, is a lot of things that we think is a common sense, and they are not being done. One thing I learned though, just observing a lot of teams, lot of departments, functions, that even though you think like that, I think when you go and take that hat off of you, that there is no such thing as, oh, this is common sense, and then you're gonna kind of go with it. Just take that hat off. and then go completely kind of, clean slate and said, okay, what's going on? And have a clear vision. Oh my God, I cannot press this enough. Have a clear vision, because if you do not have the vision, if you do not have your story, you're not going to be able to tell them what do you want.
Yes. Gosh. By the way, we're gonna go full circle here because we're basically out of time. I lived in Japan 3 times. Culture shock, completely different world all the way. But when I came home, that was a much bigger culture shock for me because I had never seen the lens of America outside of my, growing up in Ohio, right? And then coming home like, oh my gosh, this is the land of unhealthy. But essentially, um, I I basically went all in on wanting to learn Japanese and respect their culture and all those things when I lived over there. And it is incredibly hard to learn a new language, a new culture, to integrate, to find success there. And part of the reason why I've been telling so many people about it is I'm like, I found the literal American dream. When people talk about immigration, coming over, finding success, doing really good things, and now you're impacting a global operation again at another company. It really is truly special and incredible what you've been able to accomplish and what I'm sure what you are still accomplishing and will accomplish in the future. And honestly, it really is an honor to hear your story, the fact that you're willing to share it. And I hope that my audience, these people who are day in and day out trying to accomplish things in whatever sphere of influence they have, can hear these principles of being hungry, patient, collaboration, validating other people's experience, getting the long wins as long as you're able to do the short things. Your story is inherently teaching correct principle. And again, I just want to thank you so much for sharing that with me on the show today.
And thank you so much for having me. And thank you for sharing, all the things you shared, because I've learned a lot from you.
Whatever. Like I said, I will step down as CEO if you would like to come over. I'm sure my entire team would be much happier about that anyways. I talk a big game, but let's be real. You have a special talent that I can learn from. And I do hope that we can have you on the show more, especially specifically to talk about how to influence people. Clearly, you've done that in such a positive and healthy way. And we need more positive influence and examples of positive influence to get people on our side, and not just coercion or corruption or some of the negative stuff that's out there. So we'll have you back on sometime soon. But with that, Sweta, if you could give one final advice to all the people that are listening in, the tens of thousands, whatever, that come from all these different fields who are trying to find success, especially those who are not finding success right now, what would your advice be to them?
I think for me, I don't know. I'm just at a stage to give anybody, a great advice. It's just go for your passion. Love, anything you love to do, just go after that. I feel like this entire field for me, like the security, intelligence, business continuity, crisis management. If you think about, going back to where I started, accounting, finance, audit, I think that audit mindset that I had really helped in this field. But I always say this, I did not choose this field. I think I was selected. This field kind of chose me. So anything, whatever that is for you, follow that, and anything, own it. If you're not able to own it, I think that's not for you. Ownership is very important.
I love that. And I'm going to own the fact that you came on here and we both knocked it out. So thank you for doing that. But for everybody's listening in, those principles again that we were just talking about, including ownership, there was a word that Sweta kept on using here. When we even after the compliment, even after the examples that she provided, she would listen in, and then she would say, "Let me provide additional context," and then she would walk through that very seamlessly. One way that you can get a lot of success in the field is by listening to other people, hearing their valid reasons, especially even if they agree or disagree, providing more context for them to be able to make decisions. Really, that is, like I said, a masterclass on influence in such a positive way. And one way that you can help your field and this show is just by either sending us a note. If you've learned something from this show, if you got something out of it, if you have a question for Sweta, you can always send us an email at contact@readinesslab.com. We can forward that on to you. But seriously, continue the conversation. Find ways that you can do that, or that has been successful for you. Let us know, especially the positive way. Don't be the doomsday person. Be the positive influence for good. And with that, we'll see you for the next one. Peace.